My name is Angela and I'm a visually impaired designer. Hey, how is everyone's day going? In today's video, I'll be talking to you about accessibility design. This is the third part of me talking about different design approaches that I studied during grad school and I think that are helpful for considering those with disabilities when you're designing. If you want to see more videos like this one, make sure to subscribe to my channel below and turn on the notification bell and you can see all my future videos. Alright, accessibility design is when a design of a product or an environment is designed specifically for someone with a disability. The design is typically intended to just be used by those who have a disability. Now, there are some designs that are accessibility designs that end up working really well for other people who don't have a disability. A great example of this would be closed captioning. Closed captioning was created specifically for people with hearing impairment originally, but now people can use closed captioning when they don't know the language very well, so they need the help of reading it at the same time, or you're on an airplane or a bus or somewhere where you can't use the audio and so you just read it while looking at a video, or you're just the type of learner who likes to visually see the words at the same time that you hear it. I look at accessibility design in two ways. The first way is you take an existing design that doesn't work for a group of people who have a disability, and so you design something that helps aid them use that existing design. This means that someone with a disability can't necessarily use the design how it was originally intended, but it's modified or adapted so someone with a disability can now use it. An example of this would be a place that has stairs that can't be accessed with a wheelchair. And so adding a ramp gives access to people in wheelchairs because they can now use those stairs with the ramp and it's now accessible to them. The second way I look at accessibility design is when a designer creates something that excludes groups of people and they don't want to modify the way that their design works. So they find a way to adapt the design ahead of time so that when the design is launched, people with disabilities can use it still, even though it's being used in a different way than it was originally intended. Now, something I don't love about accessibility design is it really separates those with disabilities and those who are able-bodied in two different categories and separates how people are using the design. So it really kind of targets people who are being disabled as different. And a lot of times designers don't even consider people with disabilities in the design process, and so it becomes an afterthought or something that almost needs to be done out of obligation or feeling like they need to address this group of people. Not only can this separation of those with disabilities and those who don't have disabilities, it creates this tension between the two communities, and it can be emotionally taxing as well, making it feel like you're different than other people is not a great feeling. And if you've seen any of my videos, you would know that I think it's really important to try out different diverse ways of looking at a design problem, and you'll find a variety of solutions that you might not have thought about before, especially when you're looking at groups of people who are used to adapting on a regular basis. People with disabilities are used to living in a world where they can't really use everything, and so they're being creative in the ways that they use designs that already exist. And so I think it would be silly not to draw from that inspiration of people who are finding ways to create new and innovative ways to use designs. Alright, so I want to share a short story or example of this principle. So when I was living in Seattle, I went to this exhibit and it had this display that said eyes off mode. And it specifically said, if you're visually impaired or blind, you can use this feature to help you better understand the exhibit. And you had to go out of your way to go to the front desk to get these headsets to listen to audio that describes what you're seeing. And it really kind of bothered me the way that this was framed. It was singling out people who are visually impaired and blind and implying that no one else could benefit from listening to audio that was paired with this exhibition. And specifically for this exhibition, it felt like just a cop-out or a way to get around making an exhibition accessible for people who are visually impaired and blind. Instead, it could have been more intentional and framed in a way that it was an alternate way to experience the exhibition and that anyone who wanted to could benefit from listening to the audio that is paired with the visuals. Not to mention other groups of people who could benefit from using audio. Some people just learn better by listening than reading or looking at the images. If someone's not fluent in the language, it can help them hear it versus having to read it as well. Or people who have cognitive disabilities and who can't read would benefit from also hearing the audio. It's really just a personal preference. And so for them to frame it as only a feature for people who are visually impaired and blind seems like they're missing out on an opportunity to help a wider range of people who might benefit from audio. I personally believe if you're going to use accessibility design as an approach, it needs to be more intentional and used earlier on in the design process and not just tacked on at the end. Now, the difference between accessibility design and inclusive design is that inclusive design looks at groups of people who are being excluded throughout the whole process and not just at the end as an afterthought. And while using the inclusive design approach, you might not always include all groups of people who are being excluded in the final design, but you focus on one group of people and make a design work well for them, and then the idea is it will extend to a wider range of people, and then you can use accessibility tools to help aid people who aren't being included intentionally in a design. Universal design focuses on the final result or the final design that exists. With this approach, it doesn't matter as much about looking at the whole process, but it's really focusing on if the final design works for everyone. These three approaches can definitely be used hand in hand, and you might use a couple of them or just one of them. There's no right or wrong answer, and there's pros and cons to all of them, so we need to just decide in our process of designing which methods we think will work best for our projects. But once again, if you want to see more about this topic, you can go check out my other videos about inclusive design and universal design. I also have a video that's all about how disabilities are a spectrum and we need to be designing for the whole spectrum and not just the extremes of no disability versus an extreme disability. Alright, so let's go over some good examples of accessibility design that work well and help a lot of people have access to designs. My examples will include looking at mobility disabilities, hearing disabilities, and visual disabilities. There are examples in other categories of disabilities, but I'm going to focus on these three for the sake of this video. Alright, so let's first talk about mobility disability aids. So one obvious one is the design of the wheelchair. This has given access to so many people who can't walk on their own or who need help getting around. And then beyond wheelchairs, there's also things such as canes and walkers and crutches, these type of things that help people get around as well, who might not necessarily need a wheelchair. Then there's also elevators and ramps that can be accessed by people in wheelchairs or who have other needs who can't use stairs. There's also prosthetics for those who have missing limbs. There's voice-activated or joystick controllers that give access to people with no or limited mobility in their muscles. There are lever door handles for people who don't have the motion to turn a handle like a typical door, or just automated door openers. When it senses that you're there, will open for you automatically. There are stepping stools to help people who are petite be able to reach things that they can't use because of their height. And this is just a couple of examples that help people with mobility disabilities. I'd love to hear in the comments below any other examples you can think of for mobility disabilities. Next, we'll be talking about examples for the hearing impaired. Now, this is definitely a category that I would absolutely love to learn more about, but a great example is closed captioning. It really helps people with a hearing impairment be able to know what's happening in a video. Now, something you might not think of as an accessible design or something that's helpful, so maybe in a college campus, they provide an ASL interpreter who goes with you to class to help you understand what's going on and what your teacher is saying. This is a really important and essential aid for people to understand things that are happening live. And on that note, also the language of sign language and being able to use your hands and talk to people with your hands is quite miraculous. Sign language is a very helpful tool for people who have a hearing impairment to be able to communicate. Another great example for hearing impaired is blinking lights. So this is something you would see like for safety, for a fire alarm or anything like that, so that if they can't hear these sirens going off, they can see the lights blinking and they'll know that they need to leave the building and get to where it's safer. What other hearing impaired accessibility designs are you aware about? I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Some examples for people with visual impairment would be the use of Braille on a sign or in other ways to help people who can read Braille, providing a dark mode or the capability to change contrast or the size of a font, the use of voiceover, which makes it so that they will tell you what's being seen on a screen, the use of a screen reader, which reads a document for you on a screen as well. Glasses are also accessibility design to help improve people's vision through the glasses. Another example is using a magnifying glass or a monocle to help you see closer up on something that you're looking at. Another example would be audio description. This is when there's a movie or a TV show and there's a description that is spoken at the same time that is describing what's being shown but isn't explicitly said in the video. The use of alt text, which is used with screen readers and voiceover to describe what is in an image. And my last example of accessibility design would be the use of a blind cane. This helps people get around and navigate when they're not able to see everything that's in front of them. It really helps them to be able to find obstacles as they're trying to find their way. Accessibility design can be a really powerful tool if used correctly. I definitely think that it has a time and place that is very helpful and crucial and is so helpful to so many people around the world have access to designs that they weren't able to access previously. This is such a huge win and such a great thing. I hope that we can continue to learn more about accessibility and find innovative ways to include those with disabilities in our designs. I definitely think that we can all learn more about these design approaches. I know that I have a lot to learn and that I would love to continue learning more about these approaches and how I can better use them. I know that I've benefited from a lot of accessibility designs and I'm super grateful for these in my life. I hope you found this video helpful and you'll subscribe to my channel below so you can follow me along on my journey as I learn more about accessibility and designing for those with disabilities. Until next time, I hope you have a great week. Bye!